The Empire had conquered 847 worlds across the galaxy. Their ships were massive, their soldiers were strong, and their admirals had never lost a single war. For 10,000 years, they had taken planet after planet, turning free species into slaves. They believed they were the greatest power in the universe, and no one had ever proven them wrong. When their long-range sensors found a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy, they saw nothing special. Just another world filled with weak creatures who would bow before them. The planet was called Earth by its people, and those people called themselves humans. Admiral was the supreme commander of the Armada. He was old, cruel, and very proud. He had destroyed entire civilizations with a wave of his hand. When he looked at the reports about Earth, he laughed. "These creatures have only left their planet 100 years ago," he said to his officers. "They are bobbies, they are nothing. We will crush them in days." He assembled the largest invasion force in galactic history, 9,900 warships, 12 million soldiers, weapons that could crack a moon in half. It was more power than needed, but wanted to send a message to the galaxy. He wanted everyone to see what happened to planets that existed without permission. The fleet departed for Earth and smiled. He was already thinking about the victory celebration. On Earth, it was a quiet Tuesday morning when everything changed. Lieutenant Park worked at the Korean Space Defense Command. She was young, only 28 years old, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Her job was to watch the screens that monitored the space around Earth. Most days, she saw nothing but satellites and space rocks. But this morning was different. She stared at her screen, her coffee growing cold in her hand. Small dots were appearing at the edge of the solar system, first 10, then 100, then 1,000. They kept coming more and more until the screen was filled with them. Her hands began to shake. She counted the contacts, 9,900 ships all moving toward Earth. "Sir," she said to her commanding officer, Colonel, keeping her voice steady even though her heart was beating fast, "we have incoming, a lot of incoming." Colonel walked to her station and looked at the screen. His face went pale. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. He picked up the phone and called the president. Within 3 hours, leaders from every country on Earth gathered for an emergency meeting. They watched the video feeds in silence. The alien armada was still 3 days away, but it was coming fast. And then the message arrived. The aliens spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. They demanded complete surrender. They wanted all humans to lay down their weapons and accept their new masters. If humans refused, they would burn every city on Earth to ash. Many leaders felt fear. Some wanted to surrender, but then a woman stood up to speak. Her name was Doctor. She was the lead strategist at the Seoul Defense Institute, and she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. "They expect us to be weak," she said, her voice calm and strong. "They expect us to cry and beg for mercy. They expect us to surrender like every other species they have conquered." She pressed a button, and holographic displays appeared in the air. They showed hidden weapons platforms orbiting Earth, disguised as space junk. They showed secret bases on the moon. They showed satellites with weapons that could fire beams of light strong enough to cut through metal. 60 years ago, continued, our governments detected signals from deep space. We knew we were not alone, and we knew that someday someone would come for us, so we prepared. She showed them Project Horizon, a massive defense system that had been built in secret. Rail cannons that could fire metal rods at incredible speeds, energy shields that could protect cities, fighter ships hidden in underground bunkers around the world. "They think we are primitives," said, looking at each leader in the room. "Let them think that. It will be the last mistake they ever make." The vote was unanimous. Earth would not surrender, Earth would fight. Across the planet, preparations began. Soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots climbed into their ships. Scientists worked day and night to activate systems that had been sleeping for decades. In her small apartment in Seoul, Lieutenant Park called her mother. She did not tell her about the invasion. She just said she loved her and that she would see her soon. Then she went back to work. Colonel visited his daughter's grave. She had died 2 years ago in a car accident. He placed flowers on the stone and made a silent promise. He would protect the world she had loved. Doctor did not sleep. She reviewed battle plans, checked weapon systems, and coordinated with military leaders around the world. When her assistant asked if she was afraid, she shook her head. "Fear is a luxury," she said. "We don't have time for it." 3 days later, the alien vanguard entered Earth's orbit. 500 ships, each one larger than a city, positioned themselves above the planet. Their commander, Sub-Admiral, looked down at the blue world below and smiled. "Begin the broadcast," he ordered. "Tell these animals their time is over." But before he could say another word, the moon lit up with fire. And the first ship exploded. The war for Earth had begun. The Vanguard had entered Earth's orbit with complete confidence. Sub-Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet below. His tactical officers were laughing at the primitive rockets and small satellites they detected around the planet. "These creatures are even weaker than we thought," one officer said. "They have no real weapons. This will be the easiest conquest in our history." Nodded and opened a channel to broadcast his demands. He wanted the humans to hear his voice and tremble with fear. He wanted them to know that resistance was useless. Then the moon lit up. Lunar Base Alpha had been hidden beneath the surface of the moon for 40 years. Built in secret by the United Nations of Earth, it contained 12 rail cannons, each one capable of firing tungsten rods at a fraction of the speed of light. For decades, it had waited in silence. Now it woke up. The first shot crossed the distance between the moon and the fleet in less than 2 seconds. The tungsten rod, weighing 1 ton and moving faster than anything they had ever seen, hit Sub-Admiral's flagship directly in the center. The ship did not have time to raise its shields. It did not have time to move. It simply broke apart, torn in half by the impact, died before he even understood what was happening. 11 more shots followed in the next 10 seconds. 11 more ships died. On the orbital defense platform called Aegis 7, Captain Minyu Lee watched the chaos unfold on his screens. He was a calm man, 52 years old, with gray hair and steady hands. He had been waiting for this moment his entire career. "Target their command ships," he ordered his crew. "Let the small ones watch their admirals die." The platform opened fire. Missiles with nuclear warheads streaked toward the enemy fleet. Energy beams cut through hulls like hot knives through butter. In the first 5 minutes of battle, humanity destroyed 87 enemy ships. They panicked. They had never experienced this before. They were the conquerors, not the conquered. Their formations broke apart as ships tried to retreat or find cover that did not exist. But the victory was short-lived. The main fleet arrived 3 hours later. Admiral, furious at the loss of his vanguard, ordered his ships to position themselves beyond the range of Earth's rail cannons. From there, they began a systematic bombardment of the planet. Plasma beams rained down from the sky. Energy bombs fell on cities like deadly rain. They did not care about military targets. They wanted to punish humanity for daring to fight back. Seoul was hit first. The beautiful city, home to 10 million people, burned under the alien assault. Then Mumbai. Then dozens of other cities around the world. Millions of people died in the first hour of the true assault. In the ruins of Sargent pulled survivors from the rubble. She was a tough woman, 35 years old, with scars on her arms and fire in her eyes. Her combat suit was covered with blood and ash, but she did not stop moving. "Keep going," she shouted to her squad. "There are more people trapped under here." Above her, the sky was orange with fire. Around her, people were screaming. Buildings that had stood for centuries collapsed into dust. The air smelled like smoke and death. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, grabbed her arm. His face was covered with tears and dirt. "Where is my mother?" he asked. "Please, where is my mother?" Did not know. She could not tell him that his mother was probably dead, so she picked him up and carried him to the evacuation zone. "We'll find her," she lied. "I promise." But even as the cities burned, something unexpected happened. The humans did not surrender. They did not beg for mercy. They did not run and hide. They fought back. Civilian resistance cells activated around the world. Secret bunkers opened, revealing weapons that had been manufactured in hidden factories. Ordinary people, farmers and teachers and office workers, picked up guns and joined the fight. They expected the bombardment to break human spirit. They expected the survivors to come crawling out of the ruins, begging to become slaves. Instead, the survivors came out shooting. Admiral watched the reports from the ground invasion with growing confusion. His soldiers were landing in the ruins of human cities, expecting to find only corpses and crying survivors. Instead, they found ambushes, traps, humans who would rather die than surrender. "They are insane," one of his generals said. "They cannot win. Why do they keep fighting?" Had no answer. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. Every other species had broken after the orbital bombardment. Every other species had understood that resistance was useless. But humans were different. On Aegis 7, Captain Minyu Lee received word that his wife and daughter had been killed in the Seoul bombardment. He sat alone in his quarters for 10 minutes, tears running down his face. Then he wiped his eyes, stood up, and returned to the bridge. "Status report," he said, his voice steady. "Sir, are you?" his first officer began. "Status report," Minyu repeated. The officer swallowed. "Enemy fleet is maintaining position. They're preparing for the next wave of ground landings." Minyu nodded. "Then we prepare too, for my wife, for my daughter, for everyone they've killed." He looked out the window at the planet below, still burning, still bleeding, but not broken. Never broken. They had expected to find sheep on Earth, weak, frightened creatures who would bow before their superior technology and beg to serve their new masters. They had conquered hundreds of species this way. The pattern was always the same: destroy the cities, kill the leaders, and the survivors would fall in line. But Earth was not like other planets, and humans were not like other species. As the ground forces spread across the planet, they discovered a terrible truth. Humans were not sheep. They were wolves. Wolves who had been wearing the clothes of civilization, pretending to be tame. Now the clothes were off and the wolves were hungry. General commanded the Pacific Theater from a secret bunker buried deep beneath Mount, on the border between Korea and China. He was 63 years old, with a face like carved stone and eyes that had seen too much war. He had fought in 3 conflicts before the invasion, and he had never lost. He did not plan to lose now. "We cannot match their technology," he told his officers during the daily briefing. "Their shields are stronger, their weapons are more powerful, their soldiers are bigger and faster. If we fight them the way they expect, we will die." He pointed to the map on the wall showing positions across Asia. "So we will not fight the way they expect. We will fight like our ancestors. We will be ghosts in the night. We will be poison in their food. We will be the knife in the dark. We will make every inch of Earth cost them 100 soldiers." His strategy was simple: never engage in open battle. Hit the enemy when they were sleeping. Destroy their supplies. Kill their officers. Then disappear before they could respond. It was brutal, it was ugly, but it worked. Major became the most famous example of this new way of war. She led a special operations unit of 50 soldiers, hand-picked for their skill and their hatred of the invaders. They called themselves the Ghosts, and they earned their name. was 40 years old, thin and quiet, with short gray hair and cold eyes. Before the invasion, she had been a university professor teaching history. Now she taught a different kind of lesson. Her unit would track supply convoys through the mountains of Korea. They would wait for the perfect moment when the enemy felt safe, when their guards were relaxed. Then they would strike. One night, this unit destroyed 40 supply vehicles in a single attack. They killed over 200 soldiers in less than 10 minutes. Then they vanished into the forest like smoke. They sent a battalion to hunt them down. They searched for 3 weeks. They found nothing but empty camps and mocking messages carved into trees. The enemy soldiers began to fear the darkness. They began to see ghosts in every shadow. In the ruins of Tokyo, a different kind of battle was being fought. Engineer worked in an underground laboratory, surrounded by captured technology. She was only 31 years old, but she was already considered the greatest mind of her generation. Their technology is advanced, she explained to the military officers who visited her lab, but it is not magic. It follows rules, and if it follows rules, we can understand it. And if we can understand it, we can beat it. She worked 20 hours a day, sleeping only when her body forced her to collapse. Within 3 weeks, she had figured out how plasma weapons worked. Within 5 weeks, she had built human versions of those weapons. Within 2 months, she had cracked the frequency codes for shield generators. Soon, human soldiers were carrying alien weapons. Soon, they could punch through enemy shields that had once seemed invincible. The tide of war began to shift. Admiral watched the casualty reports from his flagship with growing horror. He had invaded Earth with 12 million soldiers. In 4 months, he had lost 2 million. 2 million dead, on a planet that should have fallen in a week. His officers were afraid to bring him bad news. The last one who had tried had been executed on the spot. They don't surrender, his intelligence chief reported, his voice trembling. Even when we surround them, even when they have no weapons left, they throw rocks, they use their bare hands, they fight until death. Then kill them all, snarled. We are trying, Admiral, but when we kill them, their children pick up their weapons. Their old people pick up their weapons. Even their wounded crawl toward us, still fighting. They do not stop. They will never stop. Slammed his fist on the table. This was not supposed to happen. This was not how conquest worked. He had broken 1,000 species. He had made emperors beg for mercy. But these humans, these primitive creatures from a backwater planet, refused to break. On the ground, Sargent had survived 3 months of constant fighting. Her squad had been reduced from 20 soldiers to 7. She had been wounded 4 times. She had watched friends die in her arms. But she was still fighting. One night, pinned down in the ruins of a shopping mall, surrounded by soldiers, she looked at her remaining squad members. They were tired, hungry, and low on ammunition. By all logic, they should surrender. Any last words? One of them asked, trying to make a joke. Checked her rifle. Yeah, I plan to take at least 10 of them with me. They charged out of their hiding spot, screaming, firing at everything that moved. The expecting cowering prey were caught off guard. By the time reinforcements arrived, squad had killed 32 enemy soldiers. 4 of her people died in that charge, but the 3 survivors escaped into the night. The wolves of Earth were still hunting. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. They controlled only 23% of Earth's surface, and every day that number was shrinking. Their soldiers were exhausted. Their supplies were running low. And worst of all, the humans had learned how to fight back in space. Using technology reverse-engineered by and her team, humanity had rebuilt its fleet. 800 ships, constructed in secret shipyards around the world, now orbited Earth. They were smaller than vessels. They were less powerful, but they were fast, and they were crewed by pilots who had nothing left to lose. Commander Shin sat in the cockpit of Phoenix 1, the most advanced fighter humanity had ever built. It was a hybrid ship, combining human engineering with captured alien technology. Its engines were 3 times faster than anything they had. Its weapons could punch through their shields. Was 34 years old, with short black hair and eyes that burned with determination. Before the war, she had been a commercial pilot, flying passengers between Seoul and Tokyo. Now she flew missions that would decide the fate of her species. "All wings, this is Phoenix Lead," she transmitted to her squadron. "Today we remind them why they should have stayed home." The Battle of the Atlantic Rift was about to begin. Admiral commanded the human fleet from the carrier Defiance. He was an old sailor, 67 years old, who had spent his life studying naval warfare. When the invasion came, he had applied those lessons to space combat. "We cannot beat them in a straight fight," he had told his captains before the battle. "They have more ships, bigger ships, more firepower. If we line up and trade shots with them, we will lose." He pointed to the holographic map showing the enemy fleet, 3,000 warships arranged in perfect formations. "But look at how they fight. Rigid formations, predictable patterns. They have been conquering weak enemies for so long, they have forgotten how to adapt." He smiled, showing teeth. "We will not fight like a fleet. We will fight like wolves. Strike fast, retreat, regroup, strike again from a different angle. Never let them pin us down. Never give them a fair fight." They expected a traditional battle. They expected the humans to form lines and exchange fire until one side was destroyed. They had won 1,000 battles this way. They were not prepared for what came next. The human fleet split into dozens of small groups, each one attacking from a different direction. They would fire a barrage of missiles, then retreat before they could respond. As soon as the enemy turned to pursue one group, another group would attack from behind. Commander Shin led her squadron directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was exactly what they did not expect. "Stay close to their big ships," she ordered her pilots. "Their own vessels will block their shots, make them afraid to fire." Her squadron weaved between dreadnoughts, destroying engines and weapon systems with precise strikes. The enemy ships could not fire without risking hits on their own allies. Their perfect formations became chaos. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral watched the battle unfold. Enemy ships were exploding. Human losses were heavy, but losses were heavier. "They're breaking," his tactical officer reported, disbelief in his voice. "Admiral, their formations are breaking." Nodded, "Press the attack. Give them no time to regroup." The battle raged for 14 hours. Human pilots fought until their weapons were empty, then rammed their ships into enemy vessels. Ground crews on Earth worked without sleep to repair damaged fighters and send them back into the fight. When the sun rose over the Atlantic, the outcome was clear. 1,847 ships drifted as burning wreckage in Earth's orbit. The human fleet had lost 312 vessels. It was a devastating blow to both sides. But for the first time in the war, humans had won a major space battle. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. In bunkers and ruins, in resistance camps and hidden bases, people heard the impossible news. The enemy fleet had been broken. The sky was no longer completely controlled by the invaders. In Seoul, now mostly rubble, survivors climbed out of the subway tunnels where they had been hiding. They looked up at the sky and saw ships burning like falling stars. Some of them cried. Some of them cheered. Some of them just stood in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. Sergeant, still fighting in the mountains near, received the news on her radio. She gathered her squad, now down to just herself and 2 others, and they raised a toast with muddy water from a stream. "We're not dead yet," she said. General allowed himself a small smile in his underground bunker. It was the first time he had smiled in 6 months. "Now," he said to his officers, "we go on the offensive." Admiral stared at the casualty reports in horror. His fleet had been cut in half. His ground forces were being pushed back on every continent. The conquest that should have taken a week had turned into a nightmare that was destroying his entire army. For the first time in his long career, he considered the unthinkable. He considered retreat. In her fighter, returning to base with her damaged squadron, Commander Shin looked back at the burning debris that had once been an enemy fleet. She thought about her parents, who had died in the first bombardment. She thought about her brother, still fighting somewhere in the mountains. "We're coming for you," she whispered to the enemy she could not see. "All of you." Earth had proven something today. Humanity could win. And now that they knew it was possible, nothing would stop them. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's Pride, and watched his empire's dream of conquest turn to ash. The once mighty fleet was scattered and broken. His ground forces were retreating on every continent. The primitive species he had come to enslave was hunting his soldiers through the ruins of their own cities. He had no choice. After 8 months of war, he gave the order that no commander had given in 10,000 years. "Full retreat," he said, his voice hollow. "All ships, all ground forces, we are leaving this planet." The retreat began, but it was too late for order. Panic spread through the forces. Ships that should have provided cover for the evacuation fled at full speed, abandoning their comrades. Ground troops rushed to landing zones, only to find their transports already gone. The humans showed no mercy. Commander Shin led her Phoenix squadron through the chaos, hunting ships like a wolf hunts wounded deer. Her pilots had lost friends, family, and homes. They had watched their world burn. Now they wanted revenge. "No one escapes," she transmitted. "Make them remember this day for 1,000 years." Her squadron caught a group of 20 transports trying to flee toward the edge of the solar system. The transports were filled with soldiers, thousands of them, desperate to escape the planet that had become their grave. Did not hesitate, opened fire. 20 ships, 30,000 soldiers, destroyed in less than 2 minutes. On the ground, the human counterattack was just as brutal. General had planned this moment for months. Every resistance group, every hidden army, every civilian with a weapon received the same order: attack. Sergeant led her tiny squad in an assault on a command post. The aliens were trying to organize their retreat, calling for transports that would never come. They were so focused on escape that they did not see the 3 humans approaching through the smoke. Killed 17 soldiers that day. She did not count. She did not care. She just kept firing until her rifle was empty, then picked up an enemy weapon and kept firing. When the command post fell, she found the colonel hiding in a storage room. He was on his knees, his hands raised in surrender. "Please," he begged, "I'm a prisoner. Your laws say you must spare me." Looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the cities that had burned, the children who had died, the world that would never be the same. "We did have laws," she said quietly. "Then you came." She pulled the trigger. In orbit, Captain Minyu Lee commanded his damaged cruiser, the Soul's Vengeance, in the final battle. His ship was barely holding together. Half his crew was dead. His weapons were nearly empty. But Admiral's flagship was right in front of him. The Conqueror's Pride was the largest ship in the fleet. It was the symbol of their empire, the vessel that had led the conquest of 100 worlds, and now it was trying to escape. "Sir," his first officer said, "we don't have the firepower to destroy that ship." Minyu nodded slowly. "I know." He looked around at his bridge crew, men and women who had fought beside him for 8 months. They knew what he was thinking. They knew what he was about to order. No one objected. "Set collision course," Minyu said, "full speed." The Soul's Vengeance accelerated toward the Conqueror's Pride. Weapons fired desperately, trying to stop the incoming ship, but it was too late, too close. Minyu opened a channel to all human forces. His final words would be recorded and remembered for centuries. For Earth, for everyone they killed, for those who come after us." The Soul's vengeance hit the Conqueror's pride at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from Earth. Admiral died instantly, along with the entire command staff of the invasion force. The remaining enemy ships fled in complete disorder. Human forces pursued them past Mars, past the asteroid belt, all the way to the edge of the solar system. They hunted down every ship they could catch. Of the 9,900 ships that had come to conquer Earth, only 17 made it back to space. 17 broken ships, carrying survivors who would never forget the nightmares they had witnessed. Back on Earth, the survivors emerged from bunkers and ruins. They looked up at a sky finally free of enemy ships. The war was over. The cost had been terrible: 2 billion humans dead, entire cities destroyed, ecosystems damaged for generations. The scars would take centuries to heal. But humanity had survived. More than that, humanity had won. 6 months after the war ended, Dr. addressed the new United Earth Council. The old governments were gone, replaced by a single global authority forged in the fires of war. "They will tell other species what happened here," she said. "They will speak of a primitive world that destroyed the greatest fleet in galactic history, and those species will have a choice: come as friends or learn the same lesson." General retired to a small farm in the countryside. He spent his days growing vegetables and watching the sky. Sometimes, at night, he still heard the sounds of battle in his dreams. Sargent received every medal her nation could give. She never wore them. She put them in a box and buried them next to the graves of her fallen squad members. Commander Shin took command of Earth's new stellar defense fleet. She spent her life making sure no alien species would ever threaten her world again. Major, the ghost who had terrorized soldiers for 8 months, was never seen again. Some said she disappeared into the mountains she loved. Others said she was recruited for something even more secret. No one knew for certain. And Lieutenant Park, who had been the first to see the enemy coming, became Admiral Park. She built a network of early warning stations throughout the solar system, determined that humanity would never be surprised again. In the depths of space, on 17 crippled ships limping home, the survivors of the Armada shared stories of the blue planet. They spoke of humans in whispers, as if saying the name too loudly might summon them. The Empire sent orders to all its fleets. The third planet of the Sol system was to be avoided, forever, under any circumstances. Other species heard the stories too. Travelers and traders spread the tale across the galaxy. A primitive world, a young species, an invasion fleet of almost 10,000 ships reduced to 17. The galaxy had a new word for terror. They called it Earth. And somewhere on that small blue planet, the wolves were watching the stars, waiting, ready. Because now they knew the truth. They were not alone in the universe. And they would never be prey again.